So I have quite the show prepared for you. In fact, this is actually one of the first nights in which I've done something at night with just basic lighting. Not a big deal, of course. We're going to be going to some video. That's right. We're going to be going to a number of different videos. I'll drop some links down below. I'll try to in these videos in which I am mirroring the work of other YouTubers that I believe should be reshared. Okay, so sometimes I'll just play various clips. I'm going to do, or work harder rather, to write down the names of the channels and make sure that you can go over to those channels and subscribe. You know, it's one thing for us to criticize people in this world, including myself. It's another to take that extra mile and actually give people credit. That's what's missing in this world. What's missing in this world and in the so-called online spiritual communities, the real side of it, we're dealing with real life, is people getting recognition when they share truth. And there's a lot of truth resonating with some of these individuals. I'll also have you know that I go with my intuition. So I'll search, for example, for certain lectures, and someone could be in their bedroom. You could be in your car, and you could be giving me a lecture about something that you put a great deal of time to, and you may actually want to help people with your message. Well, when you start zoning in on a niche where you're looking for information, let's just go simple, like do it yourself. And there's maybe a certain niche. Download 10 different videos, 10 different people can teach you how to build a shed. 10 different people can teach you what they believe about protecting your psyche from intrusion. Okay, or things of that nature, how to power up your spirit. So without further ado, we'll also go ahead and open up the screen capture. Please forgive the clicking. Okay, so we're going to go at this moment in time. Welcome. All aboard, strap yourselves in. Okay, I've definitely got the now I want to make sure that I'm right on the right microphone. That I'm not sure of, but I might be. Anyways, we'll go ahead and proceed. We will proceed. Please put out any cigarette butts. We're going to start with here, and then we're going to hear about the
Look what they've
archons.
done to my life, Ma. It's the only thing I could do half right, and it's turning out all wrong. That's not really true, but there's a lot of trouble and friction. Turbulent times ahead, and we have to take a side, and we have to fight on one side or the other. And in the meantime, in trouble with YouTube, in trouble with this social media, in trouble with the bank, in trouble. We all have to be mono-thinking, and then there's less trouble. It shouldn't be this way. We should just be left alone. We should be able to voice our opinion, especially on the internet with the new media. But that's becoming quite precarious and difficult. And no one even passed a law. No one even made it this way. It's just all secretive higgledy-piggledy. You know, the Las Vegas narrative is totally falling apart. You have to wonder how they gave it the green light to begin with.
They made it pretty obvious.
But it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And it might be the I don't know, the feather that broke the camel's back, or the straw. You know, it might be the thing that actually turns around our consciousness, because people are actually coming out and saying nobody died and so forth. And that hasn't been so prevalent in the past. But it's a very touchy subject. People, you can lose friends, you can lose your job.
Amen.
It's extraordinary that it has to be this way.
But it is, bro. We're deeper into the
But
matrix
there
now.
are
Strap yourselves
a
in.
concern. There's a concern that we are focused in our anxiety and anger against a particular focus and group of people.
Left, right.
This is true
right,
from
left.
when we're born until we die. It's every year, every month, every day in the media. It was ISIS who did Las Vegas. That's in many, many news reports. This is what we have to live through. It's just abominable. It's the destruction of our souls. We were born free. Oh, maybe I made a mistake. We were born into a prison. Slavery now is a common term, a common jargon. We're in slavery, and it's the banks that control us. Hail Mary to the banks. I can't live without the bank.
Or a smartphone.
Zip it. This is the actual modern culture that we live under.
Smartphone addiction.
They are our gods. And our parliaments are a farce. And they're the ones that get all the news coverage. This MP said that, this senator said that, and it's meaningless.
The cell phone towers are
and we
godlike.
follow it, and we discuss it. Meantime, are we voicing our hatred for the enemy? That is of prime concern. It's irrelevant. They're buying time while they conjure up the whole world, manipulate it, distort it, change it, and in that time, they don't care what has happened. They don't care if they're caught out at the end, because it'll all be too late. The world will have transformed, and we'll all be slaves. There's so much disquiet and uneasiness amongst the population at large, and amongst the conspiracy theorists and the bloggers, and you've got to wonder what warrants it. And really what warrants it is almost secret. It's an uneasiness, it's the inability to know the truth of the actions of the governments, of the actions of what is done in our name, and it's in the news reports. And there's a sense that trouble is coming, and yet we can't put our finger on it. It's not one specific thing. It's the general dynamic and direction of the society, civilization we're in.
Absolutely couldn't have said it better myself, but we really should be moving on with some other videos. Okay, so I have a number of things here that I could go into, and I'm thinking about where would be the I haven't watched this latest from Sunspot or Suspicious Observers, but here we go. Just as above, so below. This is actually a belief also that has its origins in Europe. Alchemy, or various Gnostic beliefs.
Good morning, folks. We've got top news, seismicity, solar storm, and more as we begin here in 171 angstroms, looking at the two bright active regions remaining silent for yet another day. The plasma filaments were the larger eruption threat when we spoke yesterday morning, but the primary rope fed to the equator on the northeastern quadrant and is completely gone this morning. After that one slid back into the corona, we still could see some plasma filaments, but they are both smaller and not in Earth-facing position at the moment. Looking at the solar wind shows the impact of the coronal hole stream. The intensified electric field drove auroral displays and geomagnetic storm conditions, but luckily just at low level 1 conditions, so we don't expect any major effects but for the tropical intensification.
We'll just pause for a moment. So here we are. So we've had increased activity.
Coronal hole departing now, and you might remember we awaited one more seismic event before the geomagnetic storms occurred. Luckily, it was more than 500 kilometers down in Indonesia. Nobody really even felt it. Happened as the phi angle shifted. Fire outlook today shows two regions where new blazes are at higher risk due to dry and or windy conditions. Let's go to our top stories. Well, we'll update this one first. The young solar system disk was shared with you a few weeks ago, but now we have the raw ALMA submillimeter view. Planets carving through the dust. Up next, we're looking at the differences between radial and meridian.
I heard that the sun doesn't exist. I heard that it was just a light bulb.
Rotation velocities and how they differ during grand solar minimum and grand solar maximum. Based on the differences that they are observing, they make total sense because less sunspots will form in the minima situation.
There is no sun. You looked at as flat as my girlfriend. There is no sun.
While the ones that do manage to sneak through have a good bit of morphing and torque potential over their lifetimes. Last night, we updated our open peer review of the first solar climate connection discovered by the observers. We could really use your help in this last phase of the open review process as we've just got
by the way, do a little promo for Suspicious Observers. He has conferences down in New Mexico, I believe the Albuquerque region, so people travel there, and I believe he has a new book, and that he may address the behavioral response element. But yeah, just coming back to center here just for a moment. and we'll go to the next video. How is this relevant? How are solar flares relevant? I believe that the veil is thinner. Can I get an amen? I think that if you do the research, you'll see the light. And it'll be something that happens within you. Seriously, I'm not kidding around. This is what's in the PDF down below. It's free or available to those that subscribe on demand. You can also just email me and request it too. But yeah, it's something that will be a work in progress. I also have some books behind me that Mitch Batros, as an author, has been looking at it for a long, long time. A lot of these people don't, agree on the same, but I see like an overlay, and there has been some articles written about a potential paranormal element to it, certain ghost hunters that are in Maine. And I think about Portland, Maine as not so much Portland, Oregon, but Portland, Oregon also sea level. Began to theorize a few years ago about sea level cities. Think Los Angeles, also Portland, high energy places where during solar flares and full moons, the effect on the people is stronger. I don't talk about it in every video, but I became awake to this stuff in my mind. Other people will say it's crazy, Alex, all in your head. Yeah. Yeah. Look how many people are talking to themselves in Portland, whether they have homes or not. And the other crazy behavior. I felt the ley lines were too intense for me to be living amongst. So I sought to go somewhere quieter. It's a lot of healing that I think I was doing. When I went to Costilla County the first time in 2012 in the winter, there was a part of me that was like, oh, it was cold during the winter. But there was something about that experience, about being there in the yurt without even adequate firewood. I survived it. I didn't even cry about it. I was upset that I felt isolated, but I survived it. Came out stronger. Wouldn't want to do it again. Say that because, during this period, I'm stepping back from the internet. And I'm in a place that's barely populated. They weren't kicking people off their land yet. I ended up YouTubing that a few years later when I returned. Unfortunately, that was not a good situation for hundreds of people that were forced into homelessness or off their land. But I got to experience Costilla County before they dropped the whip. And to me, that seems divine because I prayed to the Creator for it. I straight up prayed to God before going to Costilla just to find the right. And synchronicity happened through a person on Facebook. Yeah, face crack, face crook. But is there good that can come from some of these connections in social media? We know about the negativity and other things. What about the positive? And I think some of us have developed some positive relationships or friendships through social media. So we have to work to make it a positive thing. We will go now. I will look here and decide on the next video. So a lot of different political things that are going on that I'm basically leaping over. Certain videos I haven't watched per se, right? It's just like random bits of information. So here's something, for example, Putin declares war against, let's check the title here. There we go. Putin declares war against reptilians. And this was forcing Trump to respond. And this was just so over the top that I just had to download and share with you.
My name is Tom Price, and welcome to the positive side of 2012.
To this.
The year 2012 began a marvelous, magical time of change, and most of you are likely unfamiliar with what this means. Among other very important things, it's out with the bad guys and in with the good guys. That means we are getting America back, we're getting the world back, and Mother Earth is going to become the incredible, beautiful, amazing place she once was. ThePlanetDailyNews.com is the website, and our YouTube channel is The Positive Side of 2012. Both of
This video was produced in 2012.
These are dedicated to bringing you proof that things are changing, and that this is not just rhetoric or someone's crazy dream. Well, hello, this is Tom. This video is a follow-up on the prior video. That video was Trump and the currency reset, and it really drove home the fact that Trump is an Armageddon agent. And here I want to follow up with that. The thumbnail I used on this video was the Panama Papers and Putin's reptilian revenge, I used that thumbnail about a year ago just to capture people's attention. But now that thumbnail really is, and what I'm going to talk about is Putin's reptilian revenge, the real thing. Meanwhile, the Panama Papers you see across the top of that, remember about a year ago, the Panama Papers came out, and that was going to incriminate all kinds of corporations and bad people around the world for laundering money through international banking money laundering schemes. Well, the person who released those papers is kind of like Snowden or Julian Assange. They released those Panama Papers, which were papers out of a lawyer's office, one or more lawyers' office, incriminating all these people. They released those papers, instead of to the right people, they released them to the mass media. And guess what? You haven't heard anything about the Panama Papers. Now, for those of you who think the mass media might be honest people telling you the truth in the world, you now have a good lesson in the fact that the mass media is quite the contrary. There would be all kinds of news coverage on this, all kinds of ratings going through the roof if they published this material. But this material would instead incriminate the mass media, or at least the owners of the mass media and all their buddies.
Welcome to the dark side of YouTube.
The joke of the week came, of course,
I'm your host, Alex
from Putin.
Ansary.
It's boring, girls. It came with reference to the authors Leaf and Petrov. In the book, Ostrop Bender visited a local chess club in Vasuki. He offered the fans of the ancient Indian game to take on a brighter name. For example, the Red Endgame, because chess club sounded rather unoriginal and sad. It's boring, girls. There were no girls in the chess club, by the way, but the saying, which has multiple meanings, worked anyway. Obviously, Putin was not addressing girls. During Tuesday's press conference, which took place after his meeting with
I don't know if you've noticed, there are all these like videos out there where they got like the robot reporter now, like the mainstream media, the Oregonian, owned by the Hearst Corporation, based in downtown Portland, Oregon, their YouTube channel featuring a mirror of a news report from another agency using a robot voice. Word up, they are replacing the human voice. There goes the last DJ, late Tom Petty. And I was actually thinking about it wouldn't be a bad idea to go over, because I think somebody was saying, is there anything conscious about Tom Petty or anything that he wrote about? I'm like, a little bit. Don't have to live like a refugee. You don't have to live like a refugee. You were just a face in the crowd. You were just a face in the crowd. And see, I remember hearing that at the age of 8 years old and feeling like a face in the crowd and different than other humans in this society. And I wouldn't know how different till I became an adult and got into this stuff. So I would say, and then there's that one song with Tom Petty that's got like they were cutting Alice up with a cake. What was that? A little bit of cannibalism symbolism, Tom Petty. Do you remember that? Don't come around here no more. Hey, don't come around here no more. Sorry. All right. So you want to get back to business? We got more video. We've got hot dogs. We've gotten cotton candy. Ooh. Real briefly before we do this, I've got myself on camera while I do that. I'm going to pull up Nick. Hope you don't mind me sharing this. I want to thank you for the information. I want to do an email read. Read a letter to the editor. Oh, we're offline. What am I thinking? Moving on. But yes, he had some information about just some of these ongoing investigations. We'll listen to just a few minutes from the Richie Allen show. A woman by the name of Elena warning us about the internet, AI, mind takeover, warning us about 5G technology. Word up to those of you with your brand new smartphone.
Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Now, our next guest has been on the program a couple of times before, not recently, so it's great.
Playing segments from The Richie Allen Show does not indicate some sort of endorsement of The Richie Allen Show, but definitely recognition of investigations that probably should be shared.
To welcome her back, it really is. She's got an amazing resume, as they say, in the good old US of A. A great CV. She's been, in her time, a Waldorf school pioneer, teacher, lecturer, storyteller and writer. She's written for many, many well-known alternative publications. She's worked with the survivors of MK Ultra and Rich.
Get ready for it. We're just going to get this whole overview. I'm just predicting here, waving my wand, having not watched this video yet. In the first 3 minutes, we'll get the download.
Sexual abuse as well. We've talked about that in the past. Also, she's ghostwritten books, and she's written 2 books, Chemtrails, HARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth, and the forthcoming Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown.
You know, there are people out there that literally make love under the stars to podcasts about HARP.
About those books. This segment as well. And again, it's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Let's welcome to the program our friend Ilana Freeland. Ilana, welcome back to the program. How are you?
Hi, Richie. Thank you so much for thinking of me today.
Not at all. Well, we always think of you when we hear about weather events that are anomalous, and when we hear about weather modification, when we hear about the space fence, the grid, the coming rollout of 5G. Of course, we're going to think about you. And I was thinking about 5G and listeners contacting the program, asking about what that means and what it will mean, was what got me thinking about getting you back on the program. Before that, somebody said to me today, when can I, in the UK, pick up a copy of Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown? It says online that it's available early next year. I thought it was available already, but I was wrong.
Get it was from that weird guy offering candy, Richie, in the alley over there.
No, it should have been, Richie, Countdown. But some things happened at Farrell House, and they delayed the book. And I have my suspicions about the delay, but I think I can honestly say I've done the illustrations, I've done the index, I've done everything now, and they're on it. So it will be out in January, possibly early February of this coming year. And I apologize it should have been out last month, actually. That was the
that's right.
Yeah, you should have.
Well, make sure your old buddy Richie Allen gets a copy for review. And when it is out, of course, we'll get you back on to talk about it. Now, because some of our mutual friends, people that you and I have spoken to over the years, have been in touch with me about this. Is the moving from 4G to 5G, is this the pressing issue in terms of immediate? What is it? Explain to our listeners, what is 5G?
Skynet.
Okay, and the first thing I have to say is this is not simply one up from 4G. They cleverly named it 5G, but what we're really doing is we're moving into a whole other technology that is using millimeter waves. And these are very, very tiny waves, just above nanometer waves. And that's the problem, because the smaller a wave is, the greater its power that can be utilized and manipulated. So let me just explain a few numbers. Not that I'm an expert, but I will, I've started, Richie, just to make sure you know, I've started the 3rd book in this series, and I hope it will be my last. It is on synthetic biology.
About those
biology was my second major in college. And I'm very happy to return to it, as is Clifford Carnicom. He too is happy that I'm coming back to this. So 5G, I will cover it extensively in the next book. It is millimeter wave technology. It is non-ionizing radiation, and let's get that clear too. A lot of confusion over non-ionizing versus ionizing. Ionizing radiation, we all know, produces heat. It's thermal. And this is like nuclear radiation. This is DU, depleted uranium weapons. This is anything that causes severe cancer in the people that touch it or are around it. If you work at a radar installation, you will be subject to ionized radiation. And a microwave oven is actually, because it has a magnetron in it, it's considered non-ionized. But as you know, every restaurant, at least in America that I used to see, I'd see a sign saying, do not, those who have heart pacemakers, don't go near the microwave. So this leads us into the non-ionized, which is, though it doesn't produce heat, and this is what, of course, all the telecom industry depends upon, and believe me, the entire telecom industry is a military contractor, not just a corporate profit-making business. They are thrilled that the non-ionized is the standard for it is higher than it needs to be. I think the United States has the highest standard in the world.
Is this making you
Certainly
high?
Canada's is less, and UK's is much less, because those people seem to have cared about the people that were going to be around it, whereas in America, it's always pushing the military-industrial intelligence complex needs and requirements. So non-ionized radiation may not produce heat per se, but as many people know, even their iPhones will heat up. And
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
and that's the problem, is the heat will operate, and the heat indicates frequency, and that frequency is actually being pulsed. And the pulsing with that frequency, whatever the frequency is, for whatever device you're using that is non-ionized, that pulsing affects our resonance, and that's the key word to understand the slow boiling frog effect that non-ionizing radiation has on human beings and all life forms, even pets,
so good stuff.
Plants,
scary
anything
stuff.
alive. Because
so, what is it? What is this reality that we're in? Where like they have this reality going on where people are. It's a lowering of the intuitive immune system. Okay. Removing the gatekeeper of our mind. That's what's happened, I feel. From the smartphone addiction, technology addiction, it's affected the actual field of human beings. What is this 4G to 5G? I'm not really sure. I've seen people post about it. Again, transhumanism, and that was in the title. Of course, we've been talking about this for years. So it's something to look at a little bit deeper. Okay. At this point, I'm thinking about if it's time to finally go to this video regarding, I'm not sure how much to play. Might as well end it on this note. Not a lot of videos that I've done. Just surfing YouTube with you, even though these are downloaded. So we aren't streaming these. The Great Dragon Revelation. Just thought I would download Paul. I don't watch Paul Begley. Don't watch, dude. The Great Dragon Revelation, 12 End of Days. We'll give him a few moments.
Welcome to the coming apocalypse.
Wait. There we go.
Evangelist and pastor Paul Begley will take you on a journey into the end times prophecy. He'll examine current world events and explain how they relate to the end times. For decades, Pastor Begley has provided people all over the world with an understanding of today's world events from a biblical perspective. Now here's your host, Pastor Paul Begley.
I haven't seen this intro yet, but yeah, he's definitely
Welcome to the coming apocalypse.
AMTV, word up, take some notes.
Wow, are we going to have a powerful broadcast?
How you doing? He's got a new set,
Grab
though.
your Bible, go straight to Revelation.
No, seriously, I've subscribed to him for a few years. He's just do this in a room. They started building up his set. I don't know if this is a green screen, but of course he's involved in ministry, so there's also money. He's not a grassroots.
That we're going to deal with the great dragon. You've heard a lot about the dragon, the seven-headed dragon, the monster, the beast. What does it all mean?
Fourth horse rising.
We're going to talk about it today. We're going to actually look at some very powerful scriptures that might help unravel the mystery of the great dragon and what a role that this illustration portrays in the last days. Certainly, John, when he received this revelation from the Lord, was very descriptive in his visualization
the beginning of the end of days, or the end of the beginning
from the sea,
or the end of the end of days.
In a few moments and get right into it. The Great Dragon.
Oh wow, this guy's coming out for syndication.
New DVD entitled "The Total Eclipse of the Sun."
Oh wow!
I mean, we have these great solar eclipses, the constellations in the heavens of Revelation 12, and many other signs that God gives in the last days. I have this DVD available at my website only. It's a powerful presentation of the coming of Jesus Christ and everything you need to know about his return.
Hold it right there, sir.
Now at my website.
Okay, I got you. So I don't know all of how he gets into the sun, but he uses all of that sun symbolism. He has report on the solar flares. The sun is a spiritual being, though, on a deeper level, or even its influence over certain affairs. I'm not really sure. I think it's just more of, these are just more confirmations of the XYZ. I think that's kind of what we're getting here. Not to necessarily criticize or put it down, but let's return.
All right. So the great dragon, the great dragon. Why would the Lord want to keep referring to the great dragon?
That was good.
Well, there's a couple things that we need to understand. God wanted us to understand the season we would be in before. You just don't want to shock the world with the great dragon without understanding you're in that season. So look what it says. I want you to go to Luke chapter 21. A couple verses I'd like to read. Jesus is asked the question about the end times, and he begins to share different points. Matter of fact, let's go to verse 8. I'm in Luke 21, verse 8. Take heed that you be not deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. But when you shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. Now, the great signs, these fearful sights, well, we know that there's all kinds of things that you could relate this to. Asteroids, comets, solar eruptions on the sun.
Lions, tigers, bears, unruly neighbors.
Different kinds of things could happen that God could do that are... I'll give you an example.
The people of Walmart.
Hurricane Maria, the ocean disappeared around the Bahamas. It disappeared for about 2.5 miles off the shores of near Tampa Bay. They disappeared near the Keys, the Florida Keys. They disappeared near Puerto Rico. And there's all kinds of this footage, people walking out, literally walking out into where the ocean was, and there's no ocean. And you got a guy standing there with his camera, and he's, as far as his eyes could see, the ground is dry. Where did the ocean go? This happened. It's quite extraordinary.
It's like he's going to say, we're going to disappear next.
I thought, this is unbelievable. Then I was watching the Weather Channel, and they're explaining that this is very rare, almost never heard of.
Hot damn.
It takes an unbelievable situation to cause this.
Honestly, though, I mean, brief. I was listening to some howling winds from Hurricane Irma, right? And a mountain lion literally outside my window. Literally an animal responding to whatever it was hearing in that wind. So, biblical?
Maria, apparently God used to once again demonstrate what he did when he parted the Red Sea. The Bible says that a strong east wind came and separated the waters, and the children of Israel walked across on dry land. Now, my whole life I kept thinking, how in the world did that happen? If the wind was that strong, it should have blown the people over. I mean, to part the waters. But now I understand it. God apparently brought a storm from the east that sucked up the water and took it out into the way out.
He's figured it out.
And then later the water
would come
back in. Matter of fact, all the water where this happened,
that's exactly what happened
in the ocean. It all came back within 48 hours.
Awesome. Well, it was back. Here, okay? What do you got over here?
Left. There's been constant rhetoric and hatred and saber rattling and rockets flying and ships movement and the Chinese troops on the border and the Russian troops on the border and the South Korean troops are on the highest alert. And there's been nuclear bomb detonations underground causing 6.3 earthquakes. It's as if we're seeing the kings of the East being gathered for what I've been calling on the internet the South Asian Armageddon. I'm not saying it's the Armageddon of the book of Revelation yet. But I'm saying that, I mean, are you serious?
I am, and we are absolutely on the same page with that note. It's actually Fourth Worst Rising. Check out the documentary on my channel. We're going to go to one last video. Let's just go ahead and do one last video. Let's, so as we view, I'll try, we view the various, we'll go here. Spirit Science 12.4. This is called The Fall. So let's hypothesize on a potential
previously on Thoth and Pals.
Thoth, the poles are shifting.
How did we get here?
Oh, the poles shift?
Yeah, whoa, what's wrong with your eyes? I don't know.
We'll conclude with some humor here. Thank you for watching. We will be landing shortly. So what if?
When Thoth first saw signs of the polar shift, they returned to the land of Chem and raised the warship into the sky. They went to Atlantis and picked up the Nacals. The Nacals weren't just passengers though, and each and every being was working in unity to create a very powerful Merkaba around themselves and the ship. They returned to the Great Pyramid and landed the ship on top, forming the phi ratio with the pyramid. And then, it happened. The poles began to shift, and human consciousness began to plummet. Simultaneously, the electromagnetic and magnetic fields of the Earth collapsed, and all life...
When I saw this last night, or when I'm like, whoa. We're going through an incremental pole shift friggin' now. And when the Earth's magnetic field gets weaker, the effects of the sun and its effect on human psychology and behavior gets even stronger. Connection with changes in human behavior. Where's this going to go as time goes on? Of course, we can look at this from different perspectives, but the idea of memory loss and where they're going with this is all very interesting. Because, of course, keep this in your mind, because this isn't what's said in here, but it may trigger maybe a knowing within you by having the data that I'm adding. Okay. It is a scientific fact that our brains have contain magnetite, and this is found in birds and pigeons, fish, other animals, migratory animals that use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate. So there actually is a potentially non-conspiratorial explanation for some of the fish and birds that have we've seen a lot of dead animals as well as whales. Is it all just from sonar and HARP and other things, or maybe a combination of all these different things? But there's definitely something going on, but we haven't even scratched the surface. This society right now, with the technology, with how we're being affected by these changes.
The planet went into the Great Void, the 3.5 days of absolute blackness described by many ancient cultures in the world. The Emerald Tablets say that whenever we go through a polar shift, we go through a void space as we change our frequencies for about 3.5 days. This is also in the Troano document, depicted by 3.5 stones painted black. This refers to a time when we go through what science calls the electromagnetic null zone. During the pole shift, a phenomenon takes place where everything just seems to disappear for a certain time. Usually it's between 2 to 4 days, and the last time it was 3.5 days. Here's where it gets interesting. What happens to us does not usually happen to a normal species, because most advanced species will have their Merkabahs handy at the time of the shift.
Can you imagine?
We didn't, due to our little crisis, and we got sucked into the void space without protection. This resulted in us losing our memories. Science realizes that all of our memories are connected through cells in our brains as well as fields around our heads.
And also,
it's not entirely understood by science yet.
Freeze frame, says Morpheus in the Matrix. Freeze frame. Also, watch the Animatrix. Watch the Animatrix. It's probably so copyrighted I can't really share it with you here. But watch the Animatrix and think about that as maybe an analogy for what's going on, the spiritual warfare even taking place. But they have obviously a big robot theme in that as well.
Yet, at least not directly, is the connection our memories have with the planet itself. We've discussed this before. The magnetics of the Earth affect how we think and act. The Merkabah is an electromagnetic field that you create around your body that can serve as protection from void as you're consciously going through it. What happened to us when we didn't have that protection? It was a clean wipe. When we existed on Atlantis, we were living at a very high level of consciousness in a higher dimension. We had extremely advanced and sophisticated bodies and minds, and were capable of practically anything, living in a dimension where molecules were spaced so far apart that consciousness could interact with them without physically moving. It's hard to explain because you can literally shape your environment immediately through your consciousness in these higher frequencies. In that sense, we were creators, knowing and understanding oneness, beings of love. But then we fell. We dropped back down to this place called the third dimension. We also fell in consciousness back to zero. We forgot how to use the pineal gland, and it slowly shrunk to the size it is now, like a raisin, where it's supposed to be eyeball size.
See,
when this happened...
This may sound crazy to you, but Google, right now, scientists discover magnetic field changes can affect mood and brainwave state. They've done studies in the lab, and they found ways to affect the magnetic field of the human brain with technologies and devices that I know nothing about, but there's articles, there's pictures. You can go to New Scientist. This is where we're at now. Look at how ignorant we are as a people, yet how intelligent. So we're already at the level of cloning and micro realities. Why would we not be in a micro reality or simulation? Or why would it be impossible that we are the result of remnants of a fallen world from a very, very, very long time ago? You can even say many souls, countless souls trapped within this soul prison from the ancient world that are here now, over 7 billion people. There may not be an accident for that amount of people to be here now. I know it sounds cliche. But we are seeing changes in society as we are seeing changes in the magnetic field. As we go back one more point, and I've been talking about the changes in the magnetic field for now a decade. But more recently, in the last few weeks and months, talking about the shift within a lot of us as we're shifting from our former lives or what we were focused on a few months ago to maybe the content and place in which we're focused now, changes in jobs, changes in relationships, changes in other things, changes in outlook, changes in interest. I've seen changes in myself. Some of you have recognized it as well. What is going on? And is this a result of a larger magnetic shift? We really could see a number of different possibilities other than just a perceivably positive or negative outcome. But obviously a lot of change.
We forgot how to breathe source energy into our bodies, and our lifespans went kaput. Eventually, we went from 900 years to what it is today. We had not experienced this dense reality that we had before, at least for a very long time. We were kind of like a supercomputer that gets completely wiped. No operating system or anything. We had these advanced physical bodies, but we didn't know how to use them. This is why today we are so physically advanced compared to pretty much all the other...
Yeah, I believe that this is kind of an entertaining summary of the Emerald Tablets with the reference to Thoth, which is something that I'm just now looking at, but there is information that has led to the rise of the Archons through the fall of Atlantis, and some of these perspectives that are out there about the potential change in the actual human being, which just raises questions. If something's been tampering with us on a physical level, there may be a creator, but we've been questioning, many of us on the Gnostic path, what a lot of people have thought is the God that requires sacrifice. And I paused it right at the right moment. We see the human being here, and the human being, the blood and the blood sacrifice. There's been a lot of this going on as we've been altered over time.
Other animals in this third dimension. For a time, the survivors of the Atlantean fall, and there were a few, were literally hairy barbarians. We even had to rediscover fire. The reason we're having such a hard time finding evidence of Atlantis is because for the most part, the events of Atlantis took place on a much higher dimension than our physical Earth exists on right now. Everything I've drawn of Atlantis can't be taken as that's what it looked like, because it didn't. This landmass did physically exist, but the Atlanteans were not inhabiting that dimension of its existence.
Pause. Freeze frame. You can also find a lot of articles that are disputing official historical stats about when the first men or women, humans, basically discovered. They found fecal matter from like 35 or 13,500 years ago, or even longer than that, in Southern Oregon. And that changed anthropology and science at that moment a few years ago. Because prior to that, it was offset by another few thousand years when they believed the first humans had traveled through that region. So keep this in mind as ice melts and other changes, earthquakes, and they discover things, and it's dated way earlier than the stated version of history.
If the warship hadn't been protected by the Merkaba, the Nacals would have lost their memories. They retained their memories when the Earth came out of the void and began their work once more. Thoth and 1/3 of the Nacals went to the Island of the Sun in Bolivia. Aragot and 1/3 went to Tibet, and Ra and the remaining third went to Egypt, where they waited. Now, we're going to begin bridging the gaps between this story and our current history. In between the fall of Atlantis and the dawn of our first civilizations, who were the Egyptians and the Sumerians, there was a 6,500-year gap between them. What was happening to us in that time? We have to look at this precession chart again.
Freeze frame.
This is where we fell in consciousness, point C.
Okay, and I will also reference and cite the work of Maurice Cotterell. Check out Future Sciences. Check out his interview with Art Bell and George Norrie on Coast to Coast. Listen to it for free on YouTube. He talks about the rise and fall of civilizations. There's a chart that I have. It's in my ebook. You can also find it at my Facebook page where the album is. And there is a picture. Just type in Maurice Cotterell, Rise and Fall of Civilizations. It's possible that these stewards of civilizations, think about civilization, humans, population growing, serving these masters, but them having an understanding of the equinox of the sun cycles, and maybe even perhaps the rise and fall of civilizations. One of the factors with regard to the rise and fall of civilizations is fertility rates rising and falling or plummeting in the female population.
And this was our falling asleep phase too. Thoth, Ra, and the Ascended Masters were waiting until point D. They had to wait for humans to just evolve themselves over a 6,500-year time period until they were advanced enough to actually receive this new information that they were going to provide. Sometime in here was when the flood of Noah occurred. Because of the pole shift, the Earth went through an ice age. This is scientific fact. When the ice melted, it would have caused massive flooding. DNA is the physical manifestation of who you are. It is your soul's physical aspect. What we are seeing in DNA is changes in the codons. There's 64 possible codons in DNA, and humans only have about 22 or so. What we're finding is that there are 6 more codons being activated within these children, and they are choosing 2 of the 6. These kids are what we call indigo and crystal children, and probably the super psychics as well. Now, this is a chromosome. Basically, what this is lots and lots of DNA wrapped into this weird H-like shape. This is located in every cell, and is part of your body of consciousness. What Thoth tells us is that every level of consciousness seen here not only has its own consciousness grid, but its chromosome change as well.
Freeze frame.
The second level, where we are now.
I think it is coming from a state of unconsciousness to say that genetics do not change and to say that DNA does not change. I believe certain frequencies, certain sounds, certain realities, certain magnetic field changes can absolutely change DNA. Now, whether that's perceived as a positive or negative, now you're getting in different perspectives. Okay. Us humans down here are barely at a certain level of understanding certain things. I am more on the side of the body being upgraded to a certain degree. I think there's a lot of really messed up body image issues that have been brainwashed into us. Totally. Totally. And if you look at men hanging out in a salon, by the way, like 100 years ago, there's plenty of men hanging out in that bar that don't look they're on steroids. So some of the people today ranting about feminized men need to look at like men like with their salon hats like 100 years ago, or watch the intro to Cheers. I don't know what to tell them. And they need to get over this, whatever they're doing.
Has 44 and 2 chromosomes. To any scientist, this is basic biology. The first level, however, has 42 and 2, and this third level has 46 and 2. The fourth and fifth have 48 and 2 and 50 and 2, respectively. The primary physically visible difference between these DNA in all life is height. The first level has an average height of 4 to 6 feet tall. The second level, us, has an average height of 5 to 7 feet. Third are about 10 to 16 feet, which we are about to translate to. Fourth is 30 to 35 feet, and the last is 50 to 60. You may remember a being named Metatron, the Hebrew archangel, who is the perfection of what humanity is to become.
Now we're going out there.
The last two heights are far in the distant future for us, though.
Giants. Oh,
this is a place in Egypt today called Abu Simbel. The first thing you notice is that these statues are huge, but with the information about the DNA, this paints a different picture. These beings would be in the 60-foot range if they were to stand. They were at the 5th level of consciousness. These beings on a different wall are 35 feet tall, 4th level of consciousness. Here are some 3rd levels as well. Archaeologists saw this and thought that it meant that the man was just much more important than the woman, when in actuality, the kings of Egypt had 5 different names, one for every level of consciousness. Some of the kings were even able to translate into different dimensions, and that's how they guided the population with the power of the gods. In Egypt, according to today's top archaeologists and researchers, the Egyptians and Sumerians both began their civilizations right around the same time from each other, within a few hundred years or so. Both of these civilizations emerged out of nowhere with perfect writing abilities that were not improved upon since. When they first emerged, they were extremely sophisticated and clear, and slowly degenerated over generations. No archaeologist can explain how this happened or explain how it could have happened. They placed Egypt and Sumer into a special classification called stair-step evolution. What happened was, one day Egypt got its language, full and complete. Then the knowledge leveled off. And then it got another massive leap a little while later. Then suddenly, they knew everything about water and moat systems just perfect. Then, a little time later, bam, they're masters of hydraulics. How did Egypt and Sumer do this? Well, this is what Thoth said. When we were evolving on our own for 6,500 years, Ra and the Ascended Masters were waiting in an underground city beneath the Great Pyramid. We'll come back to this in a bit. Thoth's son Tat formed a group called the Tat Brotherhood, which is a secret group that still exists today as protectors and keepers of the sacred temples. Today, they're still connected to the Ascended Masters. So about 6,000 years ago, some members of the Tat Brotherhood would wait until they would meet someone who could understand what they were going to teach them. When they found someone, they would just tune their frequencies to the 3rd dimension and walk up and tell them information flat out.
Interesting. I would like to say with regards to the Ascended Masters that there is a lot of things that I believe are just flat out disinformation in the New Age movement. There's even disinformation about the Archons. I say that to say that I have no idea if all this is real or not, but does it strike a chord? That there's a mystery in our past civilization, in the building of these pyramids and the rise and fall of civilizations. But specific to this part, the Ascended Masters. Yeah, I don't think that we're just alone with the dark beings. If there's a dark, shouldn't there be a light? So there may be things to look at within history, and again, this is made into an animation that deals with entities on the planet that are spirits on the planet, powerful spirits on the planet that are actually here to help humanity in some way, despite the other entities or beings that are on the planet, demons, archons, aliens, whatever, that are obviously here to lead us astray, and quite a bit of harvesting is, I believe, is more than likely going on and been going on behind the scenes. Oh, especially in the 70s and 80s, along the trajectory right alongside the cattle mutilations. What's going on there? On another reality than the one that we're aware of. But returning to this, and then we'll close. 3 minutes left. 3, 3, 1.
Some members of the Tat Brotherhood would wait until they would meet someone who could understand what they were going to teach them.
And they would go, boom!
When they found someone, they would just tune their frequencies to the third dimension and walk up and tell them information flat out. They said, hey, if you do this and this happens. The Egyptians would say, wow, look at that. Then they would go underground, wait another little while, and repeat the process. Over a short period of time, the Egyptian and Sumerian evolution shot up in stair steps. As for the Sumerians, they also received a more detailed story by those who were assisting them.
I like the animations here, though, because, of course, there's a dark side of that. I'm not just saying it one way. Hey, do this. Do things this way. And then we live in this reality now. Oh, Bush talked to God, or these people talked to God and told him to go kill and sacrifice. And this is not a new story. This is not a new story at all. So we can look at this from a number of different ways, and even Thoth itself. But I'm not jumping to any firm stances right now. It's a new area of study regarding the history of mankind.
They described to the Sumerians in all of the details they remembered. They said, this is the history of the planet, write it down. The Sumerians knew about the precession of the equinox because they were told it by the Nacals from Atlantis. After this stair-step period, we began to fall asleep further. Things got worse once more. It was our falling sleep stage of precession, and although the Nacals had given us a boost, we were consciously dozing off. On that note, it's time for the story about the city under the pyramid. Keep an open mind about this because there is very little proof for what I'm about to say. For over 40 years, Drunvalo Melchizedek has been studying human consciousness through sacred geometry and spiritual teachers and masters all over the world. In 1996, he was contacted by a source in Egypt who said that something incredible had been discovered. A stone stele came out of the ground between the paws of the Sphinx into the daylight. They removed it and dug into the earth beneath the Sphinx. There they found a room with 3 tunnels leading off of it. One of the tunnels, which went to the Great Pyramid, had another tunnel coming off it, and it was shielded by a wall of light. Bullets could not pass through this field, and people could not even get close to it without feeling like they're going to die. The Egyptian government found a particular person who could turn off this field. They also had brought in Paramount Studios to film it, as they had filmed the opening of King Tut's tomb. They had a good relationship with Egypt. The government wanted several $1 million from Paramount, but at the last minute they asked for an extra $1.5 million under the table. Paramount was outraged, and they backed off. Things were silent for about 3 months. Then, Drunvalo heard from a source again, who was involved in all this, who said that 3 men shut off the light field and went inside. They found themselves inside a very large building that went on for miles underground, which was really the edge of a giant underground city, which was really just one giant building. Then, a little while later, an Egyptian archaeologist named Larry Hunter began describing the same thing, but more detailed. He said that the city was 6.5 by 8 miles wide and 12 stories deep, and the city was outlined by specific temples in Egypt. The 3 pyramids are lined up with Orion's belt, but there are also small temples for every other star in the constellation. Those temples map out the city underground and are made out of a special stone not found anywhere else in Egypt called Koinen stone. Incredibly enough, very recently, ancient tunnels were found in Romania that led to both Egypt and the inner earth. Now, I don't have time to go into detail about this particular story, but if you want, check out the book Transylvanian Sunrise by Radu Sinamar. To be clear, this is a theory that has not been accepted by the Egyptian government, but the underground city that Thoth said was there is, according to Mr. Hunter, marked by temples made of a unique substance, and the temples match the star pattern of the constellation of Orion. 4,000 years after the stair-step evolution, we were at our lowest stage of our evolution. We were hitting bottom on the awareness road. Suddenly, out of the darkness, 3 men came to Earth to give us a little nudge.
And wrapping things up here, so 3 points that I'm going to make. All right, I think we've got that out of the way. Okay, so number 1, I think that a lot of these manufactured chaos events in the Middle East is part of a larger blood sacrifice. I mean, just taking things up to where we are right now. Ironically, right, we have the ancient lands of Samaria. So we have Afghanistan, we have Iran, we have Syria, we have Egypt. We have places where millions of people are being slaughtered and being forced from their land. And we have U.S. and Russia working both sides. I would even say in a proxy war to commit ethnic genocide. So this is my position. This is how I view what's happening right now. And it's pretty dark. It's a blood sacrifice. It's unfortunate so many people talk about blood sacrifice and Illuminati that are just not even discussing the millions being slaughtered right now. Right now. And especially since 9/11. And I think that a lot of people started to ask themselves questions and then they got scared and stopped looking down that corridor. It's pretty unfortunate. that people can get wrapped up into fake conspiracies and fake news and miss the obvious blood sacrifice in front of us, it's very, very sad. And it leads to deeper, profound spiritual questions about what we're doing here. But it's not an accident that these people are being sacrificed in these ancient lands. There's a reason it's taking place. Is there a feud between different stewards, if you will, of humanity? I don't know. But they are certainly involved in an ethnic cleansing, and whatever is in control has a vision of the future and the types of humans that are alive. And it's very different from the propaganda being put out on social media and YouTube about the actual future that they have planned, what they're working to achieve. May we be liberated, I would say, from the sun. That's what they're scared of. They're scared of the reset. Oh, I'm not just talking economic. They may truly be afraid of losing their power. And they would like to pass on their mind to us. They would like to pass on their fears to us. Fears of solar flares. Really? I'm going to teach people to be afraid of this technology that can fry robotics, as they talk about robot armies, super soldiers, Russia and their Terminators. So we talk about Skynet and 5G. 5G. Transhumanism. The mind is going to be influenced by some of these wave magnetic field technologies. Wow. They have developed advanced sciences of mind control through manipulations of magnetics. And we have, for the most part, a cell phone addicted population. And they can target each individual if they wanted to by adjusting the frequency, that part of the phone that we don't even hear, or that technology, maybe perhaps to levels beyond anything I can even imagine. But it's out there. And of course, these products are being made in China. Maybe foreign governments, by design, have been given the keys to be able to hack in and literally commit psychological warfare against the enemy. Who's the enemy? The American people. People in Europe. People around the world. In China, they're being targeted by their own population. In Russia, that does not look like a healthy population. They have their own sex trafficking, alcoholism, other issues with crime. It's just this modern society is like remnants of some other world that fell. And that does ring true for me. Next thing I want to mention is I believe that Costilla County may have been an ocean once. I believe that this planet may have been positioned differently. I believe that I'm returning at times to Colorado. Something's familiar about it. I look at the hills and I look at there's something about it that feels like an ocean. And apparently there are some geological records that indicate that, yes, indeed, Colorado was at one point an ocean. Now, what's interesting about that, if there is any truth to a pole shift being sudden, caused by a quick ice melt or other factors that can lead to an actual shifting, there's that Forbes future map. Parts of Colorado may be safe if that map is accurate, that was put up by alleged psychic Edgar Casey, who may have been accurate with some things, but also grossly inaccurate with other things from what I've gathered and never really been a follower of. But someone could really have some accurate forecasts with some mixed results as well. Let's not outsell the wrong possibility for there to be a large margin in error. But it does seem that the government, and we've been noticing this, has been moving more inland away from the coast. Plus, there's the geopolitical situation. So I don't know. But what if John White, the author of Pole Shift, 1995 book, and they were predicting it around 2000, and for many people around May 5th, 2000. So there's many books being written about the pole shift that was like predicted like 17 years ago. But I don't think that information and that data should completely be thrown out just because it hasn't happened. Okay? So it's still possible. Anything can happen. And it's been fun. It's been fun bringing these videos to you. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comment section if you did enjoy this discussion, and I'll be back with more.